We're going to invite Hillary Hartley back to the stage, Alex MacEachern, who's a director at Public Digital, Will Falk back to the stage, and Sanjay Khanna, who's CIO with Cox & Palmer here in Halifax, for a debate. And as someone mentioned earlier, an Oxford Union-style debate. It sounds very serious, but we're going to try to have some fun with it. It's the end of the day, after all. We've got two teams, one over here, one on this side, one on the other. Yeah, we're standing on this one. So to finish off the day, we're going to have a debate between our two teams. The question we're going to ask over the next 20, 25 minutes is AI policy, bedrock of public good, on the one hand, and on the other hand, break on innovation. Before we hear from a single argument from either side, this is the audience participation part. So I need a favor. Like, I am actually looking into the crowd asking for a favor here. That is, we've got on the one side, bedrock of public good and AI policy, break on innovation. By show of hands, how many folks would side on the AI policy is a bedrock of public good? So I'd say roughly 60% of the room. And then by show of hands, how many are on the side that AI policy, total break on innovation?
I thought on the wrong side.
Oh, we're light. We're light. Okay, so let's see over the next 25 minutes if we could change any minds. And I need to remind myself, we've asked our colleagues to take very specific positions, very contrasting absolute positions for the purpose of the debate. These may or may not be their views. You could guess along the way. We'll come clean at the end, but I just wanted to make very clear. Thank you so much for taking a side for the purpose of the next side. Thank you so much for taking a side. Okay, I'm on timer. I've got this to keep us on pace because we're going to burn through the next 25 minutes really quickly. Making the case that AI policy is the bedrock of public good, Hillary Hartley and Alex MacEachern, 2 minutes each for opening remarks.
Thanks, Josh. All right, so many of you who arrived today would have walked here or perhaps driven, and without really thinking about it, you would have adhered to traffic laws. And we don't contemplate this often, but our traffic laws actually date back to the horse and carriage, and they're based on the fundamental principles of common decency. So don't hitch your wagon there, you're blocking my lane. And physics, don't take that buggy too quickly around the corner, it'll tip over and smash into the rest of us. And when generationally we had the innovation that is the automobile, we didn't suddenly decide to rip up all those traffic laws and reinvent the wheel. We simply adapted those laws to appreciate that the harm that could be posed by the automobile was greater than that was posed by horses. They go faster, they can carry more people, there's more of us on the highway. And so we adapted as a society. Similarly, from a commercial perspective, if you were trying to convince people to leave their horse in the stable and instead get into a metal box with a combustible engine, that was a hard sell. And so to differentiate yourself from your competitor, you might advertise that your metal box has seat belts, it has airbags, it has anti-lock brakes, it has all of these safety features, so this innovative thing is safe to use. Please adopt it, please invest in it, please put the capital behind it. Now, our learned friends here are going to accuse Hillary and I wrongly of saying that we are here to just weave some big, complicated web of bureaucracy. And we would never do that to you. We're going to propose tactical, surgical, smart things that reflect the realities of AI, which is to say that it has the potential to cause harm at a scale that is greater than many of the technologies that exist today. That doesn't mean that a lot of what's out there right now is useless and that we have to start over. It's about that tactical nuance. But I will say that our learned friends are right, that Hillary and I are a fan of brakes, because we believe that without them, there is not trust, and that without trust, no one adopts your innovation.
Alex MacEachern, everyone.
Wow.
That's it right there. But I will read mine as well. My colleague has given you an apt metaphor. The rules of the road that make movement possible rather than fatal. I want to zoom out a little bit. And this morning, someone on this stage quoted Pope Leo XIV's new encyclical, where he said that those who control AI will impose their own moral vision, and that vision will become the invisible infrastructure of these systems. Sorry to return to that, but it's important. The word invisible is important framing for what we're debating today. Infrastructure is, by definition, what you don't see until it fails. Water, power, roads, the rules that govern financial markets. We don't experience these things when they are working. We only feel them when they collapse. And by then, the consequences are unevenly distributed. They are always felt hardest by the people who had the least say in how the infrastructure was designed. In 2026, technology is infrastructure. AI is becoming infrastructure. Every single one of you interacts with it every day, whether you know it or not, if you have one of those smartphones in your pocket or purse. It's increasingly used in more and more weighty decision-making, more than just how do I get to the conference fastest this morning. But who gets hired? Who qualifies for benefits? Who gets flagged at the risk as a risk at the border? Whose health concern gets triaged first? And unlike a bridge or a water main, you often can't see it working. You can't see it failing. You just experience the outcome with no clear path to ask what happened. So the debate today isn't really regulation versus innovation. It's a false binary, and I think seems like you already agree with this. But the real question is, who gets to decide what values are baked into that infrastructure? Do you want that to happen through deliberate, accountable public policy, or by default in a product meeting in Silicon Valley? Policy isn't the brake on the innovation. It's the foundation that decides whose interest innovation serves.
Thank you, Hillary and Alex. 2 minutes on the opposing view.
Yeah, we're going to talk cars first, right? Okay, so everyone remembers how we started car regulation? 1865, the Locomotive Act. You had to wave a red flag and walk in front of the locomotive so that people would know you were coming. After that, we moved to automobiles in the 1880s. Anyone want to guess when the first stoplight was invented? About 30 years later. Okay, so look, we're going to need some stoplights, there's no doubt about that. But honestly, Hillary hit it perfectly this morning. What we need today is minimum viable policy. We don't need big policy that gets in the way. And when we have big policy that gets in the way, you know what happens? Gray usage. We've seen it in the EU. There's a reason, ladies and gentlemen, that the European Union, with all of its talk for AI, has no foundation models. There's a reason that Draghi said that innovative companies are not locating in Europe. There's a reason why we have problems with this kind of innovation. And honestly, you see this week on May 19th, they pushed all the dates back 12 to 18 months for the implications of the EU Act. Ask yourself the question, would the world have been better if AIDA had passed? Would we have a better country had we locked down rather than doing principles-based regulation?
I have to take Will's word for those examples. I wasn't there, but it's all good. So I know you're on my team, so it's all good. All right. So we're not against policy or governance or seatbelts. We're against the substitution of governance theater for delivery. I work in the legal industry where governance, trust, compliance, and accountability are essential. But what I'm concerned about and what we're concerned about is something that is increasingly being described as governance theater. That's where the appearance of governance, policies, frameworks, approval layers exist, but those mechanisms don't meaningfully improve how things actually get built. Policies are written but not enforced. Committees meet, but they don't make decisions. For the purpose of this discussion, we're treating AI policy and governance as closely related. Policy defines the intent, and governance is how the intent is applied in practice. So when we talk about AI policy being a brake on innovation, we're really talking about the broader system of policy and governance and what happens when the system becomes disconnected from delivery. By that we mean policies are designed without enough connection to how teams actually build and use AI. Governance frameworks exist, but teams aren't clear on how to apply them in real situations, and key decisions are made early without feedback from actual use. At that point, a gap forms between what is written and what is done, and that gap is where potential friction starts to build. We see this pattern quite clearly across compliance-focused enterprises, including the public sector and the legal industry. A simple example is when an organization develops a comprehensive AI policy or framework, risk tiers, approval gates, reporting requirements, but the teams actually trying to build or deploy something are left unclear on how to apply it. I did type this up and I made lots of scribbles based on the talks today. So instead of enabling delivery, the policy becomes something teams are working around. They're trying to force their applications into fitting, or they pause for. So rather than something that helps them move forward confidently. In practice, what that can look like is teams spending more time preparing governance documentation than actually testing whether a solution works safely in a real environment or solves the use case that they have. Typically, policy is defined up front, assumptions are set early, and delivery happens later once the pieces are in place. That can work when problems are stable and predictable, but as we have learned today, AI is not predictable. It's adaptive, contextual, and evolves through use. So when we apply a policy-first approach to AI, we're often making important decisions at a point where understanding is still developing and where real insight only comes from using and testing these systems in practice. Governance and policy should be designed as a gate before delivery. Should not be designed as a gate before delivery. I was helping you out there. Yeah. They should be embedded within delivery, shaping, and evolving alongside real-world use cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. All right, two very differing and opposing views. You've heard arguments on both sides. This is your chance to ask this team a question to refute what they're saying.
Alex might want to follow this more coherently, but I want to ask why you're arguing for our side. You're not talking about a brake on innovation. You're arguing about how the policy gets made.
So I don't, and that's just where my real world kind of comes into play, and I was trying to convince myself, but I'm really kind of looking for a happy medium. But I do think policy, and sorry to throw everything off, I do think it's very important, but I think the timing of it is even more important. And that's really where I think the brakes need to be put on, so that if it is a bedrock, you're really putting it at the front, and a bedrock is solid. I have a bunch of them. I live in Bedford, and they can't come up easily. So when you're moving ahead and moving forward, you're really stuck in those processes and those policies that really start to stop the innovation process.
Likewise, do you want to tackle that question, or do you want to fire something back?
Another one too, if they want, but I'm going to answer that one.
Yeah.
But go ahead. No. So we all recognize that this is a balance piece. They've already introduced the notion that there's a balance. We're saying that the balance has to be on the operational side. I'm going to quote from an excellent publication called The Radical How for Canada. In practice, it means placing huge bets. It means placing the step-by-step process, sometimes described as waterfall in homage to the Gantt charts that govern it, is still typical of major government programs. In practice, it means placing huge bets on the assumptions made at the policy stage, which is almost always the moment where the least is known. The smallest error at this stage can snowball into a catastrophic mistake at delivery time when there is no way to pivot or change quickly. As those who laughed already know, the lead author on this paper is the person asking the next question.
Whoa, low blow.
That super articulate author, as descriptive as she is, said nothing about innovation, and neither have y'all.
Except the EU has, and they've claimed again and again that by having clear rules that they're promoting innovation. Does anyone think that the innovative edge on AI right now is in Europe?
The sign behind you says we're in Canada.
Fair point. No, very fair point, because the North American ethos and the European ethos have been at odds with one another on this, both on foundation and harness systems. And I'm not taking a hit against the EU. I think most people in the EU and the UK know that they did regulatory overreach. What I am saying is that regulatory overreach has been harmful in real time to the Europeans in the last few years, and that they're alive to it and moving away from it.
I think, sorry, just to add to that from this morning, I got a nice picture where 5 years ago, we were leading the innovation, we were leading the AI. However, since we started to lag in leadership with the introductions of the Bill C-27 ADA Act and the new AI, it really pushed us down to being number 4 behind US, EU, and China. So that's it. That's all I got.
Who said that? Who said that?
Yeah, that was Hillary too, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Yes, I just got there in time for that, so thank you.
Go ahead.
I would still just say that it doesn't matter. Like the innovation will not be adopted if it isn't safe. And we've heard incredibly thoughtful presentations on the reconciliation angle, on the deep fake angle, and on a number of other really thoughtful points. So like if it's a race to the bottom, have at it. But I think that for us, for people who work in the public sector, we're not going to leave people behind. And so it's about minimum viable policy that doesn't leave people behind. It's not about reinventing the wheel or writing more income tax acts, but make sure that everybody can benefit equally. Otherwise, we're not in.
Absolutely, and 100%. And what that means as a practical matter is that we need to be able to put measurement systems around things that are qualitative right now. So we know where there are real gains to be made on a bunch of things. Language is the simplest example. I live in the healthcare world. We're doing huge equity pickups very innovatively with patient education materials in a number of languages, including indigenous languages. But I am very concerned that we will replicate the same inverse square law that we've seen in clinical resources in the past, and we need to get on that. But to do that, we need to have real experience. We need to be able to measure bias. Measuring bias is a sub-regulatory piece. Sub-regulatory pieces take experience and iteration. You can't say, no, we're not going to do it, and then say, oh, I want the experience. No one has, sorry, I shouldn't say no one. Very few people have good measures of bias yet. If you're going to have good measures of bias, you have to have experience on what that means. That's what the Stanford group has been working on, that was talked about earlier today, and a bunch of others. And we're going to need to do that. I'm talking too long.
So I'm going to jump in there. I've got a couple questions for each.
Yeah, go.
So maybe the first one to Alex and Hillary. We already have laws, don't we, against fraud, discrimination, privacy, but we're talking about AI policy. Why do we need AI-specific policies when all these laws already exist, all these rules already exist? We're already under a heavy weight of policy and legislation.
The simplest framing is to go back to the car and road analogy. Seatbelt laws don't govern the same things that speeding laws govern. Yes, it's the same world, but you need both of those laws to ensure safety. We've got a whole host of laws, of regulations, of policy, as you mentioned, most specifically probably around data and PII. Those rules were really put in place to regulate the collection, the use of, and disclosure of personal information. But modern AI systems aren't, they're not causing harm because they're mishandling data. They're not causing harm because of a breach. They're causing harm because of the inference that happens when they use it. They're creating new information. They're making decisions. And a model, for instance, think about the bias that Alex was talking about. A model that is trained on very specific, non-personal information like postal codes, purchasing behavior, browsing history, that can infer race, health status, sexual orientation, financial vulnerability without ever touching PII. So if an AI system has the right to deny you a mortgage, deny you a benefit claim, flag you as a risk, we have to have a way to push back against that. Even if the rule says no personal information was collected, the harm happened upstream of that law. We still need policy to create the right to ask about it, to contest the ruling, to get redress, and to have a decision made that's not just about the data.
One for you guys.
I was going to go over.
No.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
You're taking the claim that AI policy is a brake on innovation. But we make new drugs go through years of clinical trials before they reach patients, even though clinical trials are improving. But nobody calls that a brake on pharmaceutical innovation, do they?
No, and I think they both are equally important as far as policies and approvals go. However, the process is very different in the sense that the drugs are stable once approved. They're highly controlled in the testing and their usage, and they operate within well-defined biological systems that are very controlled, even though that's happening right now with AI more so. However, AI systems are continuously evolving. They're influenced by changing data and context, and they're embedded in dynamic workflows, whether it's at the start, the middle, or now at the end, where they're getting into the actual decision-making and the recommendations. I think they both need the same type of regulations. However, I would still say that, similar to what I mentioned earlier, by being stagnant almost in that sense for the drugs, it's really a different approach and when those policies start to get developed. And I think that with AI policy, it does need to be that continuous evolution in tandem and in parallel, the development.
I'm just going to add that the FDA legislation in the US and similar legislation around the world is as old as I am. It's like 60 years old, okay? So it has developed a set of case law. I think this is exactly the point. I mean, I'll ask Hillary, isn't this exactly the point you were making about minimum viable policy? Like, isn't this exactly the point that we need to keep the policy tight at this point so we can get enough experience and use it? And I mean, I'm not going to claim that there aren't risks. It would be foolish to claim that there aren't risks. There are real risks. But, you know, I mean, Draghi wrote in his 2024 report on Europeans' regulatory burden that many EU laws have taken a precautionary approach dictating specific business practices ex ante to avert potential risks ex post. For example, the AI Act imposes regulatory requirements on general purpose models. He then goes on, this is the former president of the EU, he then goes on to talk about how that has crushed innovation. And the 2024 report, if you're really interested in this topic, is really worth reading because he talks about how the interaction of new laws with old laws actually becomes a double, triple burden because we don't know where those are. So I think, you know, frankly, again, Hillary was right this morning. We need minimum viable policy so that we support regulation.
I want to
so
call
we
you
support
there.
innovation.
All right, final round. Final round. Closing remarks, 30 seconds each. You've heard arguments on both sides. Closing remarks, make it count. Alex, you opened. We'll give you first chance. Oh, Hillary, sorry.
She's got the closer. I don't know who this Hillary person is you're talking about. I'm just here making an argument. She sounds smart, though. I think that thinking about legal frameworks, the best legal frameworks don't tell you to go point by point by point, thou shalt. That's how we got the healthcare crisis in the U.S., because a URL was encoded in legislation, among other things. So, yes, we need frameworks. We need big picture. We need minimum viable policy that can be tested. I don't believe that's a brake on innovation.
+1. I'd also just say that public trust is infrastructure, and without it, there will be no adoption. No one wants to be the first users of Skynet. No one wants to give them admin access. And so we need policies that are thoughtful and that are tactical and that don't leave people behind. And those don't have to be needlessly prescriptive, nor do they need to be voluminous, but they need to be thoughtful enough to bring people along and have us build trust with them.
Thank you, Alex. 30 seconds, Sanjay.
All right. So on the motion, is AI policy a bedrock of the public good or a brake on innovation? I think the discussion today shows it can be both, depending on how it's designed and applied. That was foreshadowing in my part. Policy and governance are absolutely a bedrock when they're grounded in how things actually get delivered. They build trust, create clarity, and allow teams to move forward responsibly. But they can become a brake when they are designed too far from the realities of use, when they rely on assumptions made early, and don't evolve with what we learn through real-world experiences. And that matters especially in AI, where understanding doesn't arrive all at once. It develops through iteration, testing, and feedback and practice. So the opportunity here isn't to step away from governance, it's to design governance that stays close to delivery, adapts over time, and supports responsible progress at the pace through systems actually evolve. One last line, because in the end, trust isn't built by what we document, it's built by what we can safely deliver.
Thank you, Sanjay. 30 seconds, Wolf.
We started with cars. We have progressively moved from minimum viable policy and legislation to better and better road safety. We've taken the numbers down over time, over 100 years. We're now at a point where AI is coming into cars, and the insurance costs in San Francisco for self-driving vehicles are 2/3 that of humans because the accidents rates are so much lower. In medicine, and I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to where I live, but in healthcare, we have big problems. We need big solutions. We need innovation to get out of it. We're using the stuff, and we're using it well, and we're using it responsibly. We need more legislation and regulation, absolutely, but we need policy to be respectful of innovation. Innovation has to come first.
Thank you to our two teams. Maybe a round of applause for our debaters. Before we started, we asked you to do a show of hands. On the one hand, AI policy is the bedrock of public good. On the other hand, AI policy is a brake on innovation. This time, by round of applause. Okay? By round of applause. Those in favor of AI policy bedrock of public good. Likewise, by round of applause, AI policy, brake on innovation. I think we swung some audience on this one. Quick reminder to folks before we exit stage that today our debaters were assigned specific roles. So 30 seconds or less, you can come clean. How do you really feel about the subject? Over to Will first.
Yeah, I believe everything I've said.
Sanjay?
I'll be more serious than that. I learned a shit ton listening carefully to these two and reading all their stuff. I love the radical how, and I love the minimum viable policy points. I'm going to steal them all over the place. I thought they're really actually very smart on what they actually believe, which I'm sure is not what they argued.
Come clean, Sanjay.
So I was very much on the Bedrock side, and I think through my learnings, and I remember I posted this on LinkedIn, so it wouldn't go against everything I've been telling people. But I'm kind of in the middle now, to be honest with you. And I think even in my real world scenarios where the competitive advantage is we need AI, we need to implement something, policy is going to slow us down. I think we need to come up with that happy medium. So my fundamentals are still very clear on human in the loop. AI outputs must be reviewed and validated before use. Confidentiality first, client confidentiality or personal information must never be exposed to unapproved systems. Compliance by design, AI must align with existing ISO certifications, PIPEDA, those things that we can leverage right away. Transparency, we must be able to clearly explain how AI is being used. And measured adoption, AI should be piloted, evaluated, and approved before broader deployment.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Over to you guys.
I also stand by everything I said. Though I will maybe add some nuance. And I'd also say, like, I think Will raised a good point about autonomous driving. Like, however, self-driving cars are also known for not detecting black pedestrians. And they have a higher hit rate than many non-autonomous drivers. And a lot of AI is uninsurable because it's such a liability. So, like, even within some of these use cases, it can be problematic. I also, like, my background is law. I worked in criminal law and, like, once had to argue that a cell phone is a computer. And so I do think that a lot of things that we have in existence today can be modified for AI, but that there are things that just have not been contemplated outside the realm of sci-fi that we need to make space for.
It might not come as no surprise, but I'm going to put a big kind of if caveat on my answer, which is I do tend to agree that some laws can be stifling for business, for people who want to innovate and get their product into the hands of users. The difference, the caveat that I'll put there is we absolutely have to have public sector rules. So, you know, my team in Ontario, we pushed out some of the first transparent AI policy for public sector development. Those guardrails must be in place because if you need to get something done with the government, you have nowhere else to go. I can choose, you know, I can do some research and choose, do I want to use Claude or Gemini or, you know, which one is safest with my data? I can choose tools. I'm not forced to go use something that somebody has, you know, a good idea that somebody has come up with. When you're forced to use it as a means of livelihood, of safety, of health, I believe we absolutely have to have guardrails.
I want to say thanks once again to the debaters, and remember, at the end of the day, we're all still friends. We're in this together. Thank you.